Hey, gang, this week's episode is brought to you by oldschoolshirts.com. Hey, check them out. You like defunct teams and leagues and t-shirt form? Well, you'll find them there, but a whole bunch of other stuff, too. Do you remember a radio station of the past or perhaps a mall that you used to go to? All kinds of great cultural and sports memories can be found at the great folks at oldschoolshirts.com. Promo code GOODSEATS for 10% off all of your purchases. And now, here's our show.
Throw check, back around with 12 seconds. Fox on it for the Rangers. Throw check down low, up the boards, Panarin, 7 seconds, towards the net, puck is loose. Zibanejad looking for it, Fox is there, time winding down, comes to Miller, he fires, it's blocked, Miller shoots, he scores! Just before the buzzer! DeAndre Miller beats the buzzer by about 1/10 of a second, and the Rangers have tied the game at 1. Around Heiskanen moves to the net, Panarin shoots, saved by Ottinger. Puck now played by Zibanejad, walks in front, tripped up, puck is loose, Panarin with it, feeds Fox, backhand shot, he scores! He scores! Rangers win! Adam Fox in overtime! The Rangers defeat the Stars in incredible, unbelievable highlight film fashion. Rangers win it 2-1 in overtime. After Keandre Miller tied the game in the final second, Adam Fox wins it in OT.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Hey now, how is it going, everybody? Your pal Tim Hanlon here, and it is, of course, Good Seats Still Available, the curious little podcast that is devoted to what used to be in professional sports. Thanks for coming on by. We know you got a lot of choices out there in podcast land, and we appreciate you doing it this time for us. And let's light the lamp, shall we? We're going to get into all kinds of sports. It's not just hockey. No, when Kenny Albert's in town, it could be one of a zillion different sports, and we're honored to have him this week. In the lead up to his brand new book. That's the excuse. It's called A Mic for All Seasons. And it comes out, depending on when you're listening to this here episode, either tomorrow, we drop on October 9th. So the book is available on the 10th of October 2023. If you're listening from that day onward, it's available now. What are you waiting for? It's wherever good books are found. You can pre-order it if you want, if it's a day ahead. And yes, of course, you can go to our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com. Just search up this episode number 320, and you'll find a convenient link to this book. And as you'll hear, well, certainly the clip there sort of gives you just some evidence of the talent that Kenny brings to the microphones and to many a broadcast for, almost 30, maybe a little bit more than 30 years now. It's hard to believe. He still seems like a young spring chicken, if you ask me. But that's because, I've grown up in a world of Alberts everywhere. Marv, obviously, being the father of Kenny, and Kenny also has two famous sportscasting uncles in Messrs. Steve and Al Albert, who all combined, right, have been part of the American sports broadcasting landscape for dozens of years. And Kenny is absolutely carrying that mantle phenomenally well. And depending on the day, the week, the year, or whenever you're listening, it could be a myriad of sports. And perhaps one of the most not only capable and ubiquitous voices out there, but frankly, just built for just any sport you throw at him. Hockey, probably, maybe, I would suggest, maybe his first love. Certainly where he got his professional start, as we'll talk about, with the Baltimore Skipjacks of the old American Hockey League, if you remember that. That clip that you just heard just shows you just how in form Kenny is. That was from, I guess, an MSG broadcast. I don't know if it was a simulcast. I think it was a radio call of the New York Rangers against the Dallas Stars just this early this year. January 12th of 2023, as heard on ESPN 98.7 FM in New York, soon to be, by the way, the former FM signal, because I know that the station owner is now going to revert back just to the AM signal. But I digress. That's a great example of the excitement that Kenny brings to not only Rangers hockey on a local level, but a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, Kenny does, you name it, and he is either doing it or has done it. Certainly in New York, well known for broadcasting Knicks games on MSG Network and Ranger games on the ESPN station there, WEPN, but also MSG on television. But has for the many years, for almost 30 years, I think it is now, has been with the Fox Sports family since pretty much the inception of the debut of Fox Television in the United States at the ripe old age of 26, joining Fox Sports, and from the get-go covering things like the NFL Sunday games, the NFC package, formerly at CBS. You can hear Kenny's dulcet tones every Sunday to this day, but also has been part of lots of different broadcasts on Fox, including the NHL when it was on Fox, and the glowing puck. Do you remember that? We get into that conversation. Of course, Kenny has been part of Major League Baseball's offerings on the Fox network, and that's just scratching the surface. You can hear him on various Turner Sports broadcasts of the NHL. He's been part of those national broadcasts, wherever those have been over the years, on NBC or Versus or Outdoor Life Network, if you remember those. We get into all that kind of stuff and some great, interesting little tidbits that you might not know also along the way, especially in our little niche of forgotten sports. The Washington Bullets will make a little appearance. You may remember the Staten Island Stallions of the U.S. Basketball League in the mid-1980s. Well, Kenny wasn't even a professional at that point. He was still kind of moonlighting from college and doing all kinds of stuff on the side, and was part of that mix as well. The Skipjacks, of course, in the old AHL in 1990 when he made his first full professional debut. But if you want some interesting trivia, how about the World Basketball League? If you remember that from the mid-90s, there are a couple of broadcasts in Kenny's past from that. The Washington Bullets, no longer known as the Bullets, but the Wizards, of course, make an appearance. And we even get into perhaps the grandest of all trivia questions you might be asked about the great Kenny Albert. Who is the U.S. American sportscaster that has done not one, not two, but 3D television broadcasts? Well, you'd be talking to Kenny Albert, that's for sure. We'll talk about that story. 3D broadcasting, you remember that from the early part of, I don't know, I guess it was maybe about a decade ago when 3D was rumored to be the next big thing in television broadcasting. Kenny will tell us a story or two about how he became the king of 3D, shall we say, in sports broadcasting. But that's just, again, just scratching the surface. You go to Kenny's Wikipedia page and you can see literally since in earnest in 1990, and frankly, a bit earlier than that too, informally, just a career timeline that spans all kinds of touch points in hockey, in basketball, in football, the Olympics, lots of Olympic coverage, college sports as well, even horse racing and a whole bunch of other things. And it's a fascinating ride. And he's only in his mid-50s. So I would say that Kenny Albert has quite a long lifespan to go. And sports on television and on the radio are better for it. And that's our conversation this week as we talk with the Mike for all seasons. He is Kenny Albert, coming up in just a few moments' time. Again, that is the name of the book. The subtitle is called My 3 Decades Announcing the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLB, and Olympics. It's got a couple of forwards in there by people like Wayne Gretzky and Walt Clyde Frazier and a whole bunch of other great sports luminaries in there weigh in with their kudos for Kenny. And again, it is available wherever good books are found, depending on when you're listening to this. If you're listening to this show as we drop it on October 9th of 2023, it will be available tomorrow, the 10th. If you're listening to this episode on the 10th or beyond, well, it's available now. And either way, you should run, not walk, to your favorite bookseller and either pre-order it or order it in earnest now. Of course, you can get it from our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com. Just search at this episode number 320. My goodness, with Kenny Albert, you'll find a convenient link or two that will whisk you away to Amazon, and we'll get a couple of shekels of referral love. We appreciate that. And probably the quickest way you'll ever be able to get this book, and you get it in hardcover or Kindle fashion by doing so. And you will enjoy it as I did in preparation for this episode. And how about a taste of that now? Well, shall we? Let's get into our conversation with the great Mike for all seasons. His name is Kenny Albert. Please, as always, enjoy. Tell me, just maybe kind of to scene set. I mean, you know a little bit about the background of this silly little show, but I am fascinated. We've had a number of broadcasters on the show in the past, and to a person, the word that comes to mind is hustle. There is an eternal hustle, obviously in your story for sure, as we'll get into specifically. But why is it the nature of this business that requires so much of a hustle, if you will, to do so much in terms of travel and all that kind of stuff? Plus, but frankly, jobs, and many times simultaneous jobs, of which you are perhaps undisputedly the king of.
Right. I mean, I guess I learned it at a young age, growing up in a sportscasting family with my father and his two brothers. They were always hustling, and that's a great word. I've never really heard it put that way, but they were traveling and doing multiple games, multiple sports. So I probably learned it at such a young age. And then when I was in high school, I was real fortunate. A local cable station came to my school to film a girls' basketball game, and I volunteered. They didn't have any announcers, and the producer gave me the opportunity over the next 2.5 years to broadcast between 75 and 100 sporting events all over Long Island, high school, Division III college. And that's probably where it started for me, the hustle, the travel. And then even in college, I tried to do as much as I could, whether it was on the air, internships. So during my collegiate years, I was calling basketball games at NYU. I was playing on the club hockey team there. I was working as an associate producer for Mets Extra, Howie Rose on WFAN radio. I was keeping stats at Knicks and Rangers games and football games. So just wanted to really get as much experience as I could. And then that morphed into the multiple sports, the travel, trying to be in two places at once during the broadcasting career, I guess, over the last 30 years.
But it also speaks to, and again, aside from folks who have achieved somewhat of a rarefied air in this business like yourself, the vast majority of folks who inhabit the broadcast booth in pursuit of sports broadcasting excellence. I mean, it's almost, I think, similarly an indication of the, I don't know, unevenness or sometimes ruthlessness, not ruth, but perhaps ruthlessness too, of the industry, media, right? It's not always the most stable gig per se, and there's constant change in the executive halls and rights going from place to place. I got to think part of this is just the nature of the industry and the beast too, no?
Right, and I'm real lucky in that I've been at two places, Fox and MSG, for 30 and 28 years respectively, and NBC for a while, more than a decade on the hockey side, Olympics, and now over at TNT. And also the networks I've worked for have rights to multiple sports. So I've been real fortunate in that respect. But, as far as the initial part of the question, I just love doing it. It's what I enjoy. I love the preparation. I love the actual games. And, would I rather be sitting around doing nothing or calling a game? Probably calling a game. So, it's just, I tell people that there's a lot of work and a lot of travel, so much preparation, but I never actually feel like I'm working. It's fun work. So very fortunate in that regard, but also to have great bosses who allow the jigsaw puzzle of a schedule, maybe missing an event here and there. Not often, but it does happen on occasion. But it's just something that I always wanted to do from a young age, from when I started calling games into a tape recorder, and then through those high school and college years, and calling minor league hockey in Baltimore back in the 1990s is just something that to me is a lot of fun and never seems like work.
All right, I want to get to that part in a second, but I was just blown away by a sentence in the book You basically have said, and we have to believe you that this is true, that you've never missed a game because of travel issues. Can that be true, given all of that you do and have done?
Knock on wood, that is true. Now there are some games. So football on Sundays obviously takes priority, and then I'm usually at a Turner hockey game on Wednesday night, and then doing radio for the Rangers and 15 or so games for the Knicks on the TV side every year. Now there are probably a few that when we sit down and go through the schedule in September, there are probably a couple that would be impossible to get to. So those aren't even on the schedule. So I might miss a few just based on what we go over prior to the seasons. But of all the games that I've been scheduled for, again, knock on wood, I've never missed one due to a travel issue. Missed one due to a sore throat back in 1996, I think, or a Rangers radio game in Washington. But that was really the only one that I missed due to an illness, even through the pandemic years when I was calling games both on site at Madison Square Garden, at NFL stadiums, and then a lot of games in studio off monitors, and probably took about 150 COVID tests through those years and never even had to miss a game during that time.
That has to be something of a level of insanity that is not shared by many people in your business, right? I mean, you must be looked upon on some level, besides the consummate professional and the true Mike for all seasons, as somewhat of a I wouldn't call it an oddity, but a rarity, right? Because I just can't imagine, given all the odds, just seem so ridiculously against it. And not to jinx it, but it's admirable and something to with luck and persistence and preparation and good health and all that kind of stuff. But that's pretty amazing to me, given there's so many opportunities that your streak could easily be broken.
And there have been, some occasions where I've also missed games, for my daughter's high school and college graduations, for example. So I'm not professing to, be in the category of Lou Gehrig, Cal Ripken by any means, but again, very fortunate that health-wise and travel-wise, there haven't been too many games that I've been scheduled on that I've had to miss. There are occasions where somebody might look at me and wonder how I've actually physically gotten to where I am at that moment. I remember during the 2014 and 15 hockey playoffs, there was some crazy travel in the conference final round in 14 between New York, LA, Montreal, Chicago, and then the next year, similar with New York, Tampa, Anaheim, and Chicago. And I called a triple overtime game in Anaheim one night, and the game started on the early side, 8 Eastern, so it was 5 p.m. out there on the West Coast, and I made it to the morning skate in Tampa the next day, and Marty St. Louis, one of the Ranger players at the time, had watched the game the night before, and he saw me and he said, how in the world did you get here? So there have been some funny instances where I feel like I'm in 2 or 3 places at once.
Yeah, but I'm sure it's not glamorous either, right? I mean, that must have been a situation where perhaps the network maybe scrambled a private plane for you, or I got to think most of your stuff is commercial and average Joe.
Yeah, 99% of it is commercial. There have been a couple of times where it has not been, but no, that was a red eye from LAX to Miami, and then a connection to Tampa. So not all glamorous, sleeping on planes, taking naps, getting 2 or 3 hours here and there. But, again, it's not heavy lifting. I'm not sitting at a desk doing something I hate or manual labor. It's a job that I absolutely love. So if I have to take a couple of early flights or red-eye flights here and there, it's certainly not a big deal.
All right, we'll come back to process in a minute, but let's go back to your early years, right? And I guess the sort of sarcastic question is, did you really even have a choice in terms of career, given your upbringing and how many people in your household, both directly and the 2 uncles, were involved already and deeply and successfully in the business?
Right. I get that question often. I got a tape recorder for my birthday from my parents when I was 5 or 6 years old and started announcing games into the tape recorder. I set up my bedroom like a radio studio. I had the desk and the bed in the middle and the TV on the other side, but not once was I ever told, you have to do this. You have to go into broadcasting. You have to call games into the recorder. It was just something I grew up around and always loved to do. And I did a lot of sports writing as well in high school and college. So had a lot of experience back in the day. And I think that's part of the reason why I decided to write the book. I knew that I enjoyed writing and wanted it to be in my own voice, my own words, my stories. So did not use a ghostwriter, wrote it myself with some help from my wife and kids as sort of co-authors and editors, and they came up with some story ideas, but did it primarily on my own. But no, getting back to the original question, there was never any pressure, never was told that I had to do this. It was just something that I always loved. You know, there are, you look at any profession, lawyers, doctors, you name it, there are thousands and thousands of people in each profession, I'm sure, around the country, around the world, who went into their parents' profession just because they were around it. They absorbed by osmosis, and you really learn at a young age. You know, I felt like I had an advantage because I tagged along with my father, with my uncles, to various games, to the WNBC studios in New York. I would do stats for them and would learn just by sitting in the broadcast booth next to the announcers and in the production meetings and listening in to the banter between the production truck and the announcers throughout the game. It was just such an advantage, you know, probably better than anything I could have learned in a classroom at that point.
So were your uncles surprised, not surprised, encouraging, befuddled when you started to, I guess, ideate literally that you were going to do this for a career? And I guess the other question is, when did you literally know that you could on your own do this for a living versus just doing what you were doing in school and college?
Right. They were always encouraging. You know, I was probably on the quiet side as a kid, aside from when I was doing the games into the recorder. So I never came out and said, this is what I want to do. But I always knew in my own mind. I think growing up, really always knew that this is what I wanted to do. And throughout high school and college, getting so much experience, both at Cox Cable and then at WNYU Radio and with some of the internships and other jobs that I had, you know, always hoped that it would happen, thought it would happen to some extent, never to the extent that it did happen. My goal was to do hockey on the radio. And my first job was in Baltimore. I was hired by a team in the American Hockey League, the Skipjacks. And those were 2 years that I would never trade in for anything. Just between the experience, the reps, the practice, 80 games a year, that went a long way, made some great connections, and wound up getting hired by the Washington Capitals the next year in 1992, and eventually by MSG in 95 and by Fox Sports in 94 to do football and then hockey. So always wanted to do at least hockey play-by-play. And then due to the crazy circumstances when Rupert Murdoch made an unexpected bid on the NFC package in 1993 for the 94 season, and Fox wound up hiring a bunch of young broadcasters at the time. And none of us ever thought that we would be calling NFL football at the network level, let alone at the age of 25 or 26. I was 26. Joe Buck was 25. Tom Brenneman and Kevin Harlan were in their late 20s, early 30s. We were all hired by Fox at the same time. And I'm really proud to say that it's year 30 for me. Joe Buck's had a Hall of Fame career. Kevin Harlan's had an unbelievable career. Tom Brenneman at Fox, 25 plus years as well. So David Hill and Ed Goren and George Krieger, they took a chance on all of us back in 1994. And hard to believe it's 3 decades later. And for me personally, it's my 30th season calling NFL games on Fox.
All right. So, you know, the sort of bent on this little show, right? So a couple of nits and divots, I guess, of forgotten teams and leagues and stuff. And also, I think another sort of level of admiration, I guess, perhaps amongst your peers. You perhaps have dodged many bullets, I guess, from literally and figuratively with the Washington team, but we'll get to that in a second. The having to work for lots of teams and leagues and stuff that have come and gone. I mean, there's a lot of people who have to put in a lot of dues. Not saying that you haven't, but lots of pitfalls and lots of cul-de-sacs, shall we say, given trying to get as much experience as possible. I mean, but tell me about the Baltimore Skipjacks, because that was really pretty much your first sort of full-time professional broadcast gig, correct? In the old American Hockey League?
It was the first full-time gig. I was real lucky, again, going to college in New York, wound up filling in on some New York Islanders radio pre and post game shows. And that led to filling in on play-by-play for 4 games during my senior year in college.
By the way, that's insane. I mean,
right, pretty much unheard of,
amazing,
right? But
yeah.
A lot of it was being in the right place at the right time and filled in on these 4 games. So at that age, most people who want to get into it, their goal is to get a minor league job first and then use that tape to hopefully get a job at the major league level. Well, I had these 4 NHL tapes already and was able to send those around to minor league teams and wound up getting hired by the Baltimore Skipjacks in the summer of 1990. Met with the owner, the late Tom Ebright, and Alan Rackfin and Jim Riggs, who worked in marketing and PR. And I was hired to do the broadcast and really whatever else they needed, PR, sales, marketing, go pick a player up at the airport, etc. And it was my first time really away from the New York area. I grew up on Long Island and then went to college in Manhattan. So those first 2 years in Baltimore, living on my own, just getting invaluable experience, calling the games on the radio in Baltimore and taking the 6, 8, 10-hour bus rides with the team. And I was around the same age as a lot of the players. And my roommate on the road was our assistant coach, Barry Trotz, who's gone on to become the 3rd winningest head coach in NHL history. So just a tremendous experience. There's a whole chapter in my book about the 2 years with the Skipjacks and just wonderful times down in Baltimore. And as I referenced earlier, made connections with folks at Washington, with the Capitals and at Home Team Sports, and wound up getting the next job with the Caps prior to the 92-93 season.
Yeah, so in many respects, the Washington, D.C. area, a very a fertile ground for that kind of stuff. Tell us about Home Team Sports, because it's interesting because they were arguably one of the first real regional sports networks, which now seem to be, depending on which arena that you're in, market-wise, almost imploding. And frankly, too, your Skipjacks job came because of an interview with something called the Sports News Network, which I don't think I've ever heard of before, a gig that you didn't get, and yet I think almost felt relieved that you didn't.
Right. Those weren't necessarily connected, but I did have an audition/interview. Sports News Network was not around for very long, but they were a competitor to ESPN down in Arlington, Alexandria, Virginia, right outside of DC. And I wound up with an audition there right after college. And fortunately, I did not get the job because I wound up interviewing with the Skipjacks, and play-by-play was my goal. So that all worked out very well. Home Team Sports was one of the original early regional sports networks, very highly thought of around the country. They did the Capitals, Bullets basketball at the time, now the Washington Wizards, Baltimore Orioles baseball. They had a terrific production crew, great announcers, and Jody Shapiro and Bill Brown were the 2 gentlemen who ran the network, who took a chance on me in 1992, hired me to do the Capitals games and filled in on Bullets games and Orioles games and did a whole bunch of college sports. So was there for 3 years, thought I would be there for a long time, loved Home Team Sports, loved living down there. An opportunity came up with the Rangers and MSG, which was a really tough decision at the time because I really enjoyed what I was doing in DC, but definitely think back to those days with great memories. And I'm so, I'm in debt to Jody and Bill forever for taking a chance and hiring me, along with Lou Strudler at the Washington Capitals back in 92. And then a couple of years later is when Fox Sports first started with the NFL package, and wound up moving back to New York and MSG in 95. And I guess the rest is history. But Home Team Sports did such a great job. They did the Caps, Bullets, and Orioles for many, many years, and have nothing but great memories. I still have an HTS blazer as well in my closet, a blue blazer with the HTS logo on it. It's a collector's item.
All right, what's this? Oldschoolshirts.com. Fantastic. You've heard me talk on and on and on about the great folks and the great wares at oldschoolshirts.com. Like the name implies, it's old school and it's shirts, and they put them together, into what they call oldschoolshirts.com. It's like the name implies, but of course we love them primarily for their sportswear. You name the league of the past, you name the team of the past, the chances are huge that they're going to have more than one shirt and different color schemes for things that you may remember from the United Football League or the Major Indoor Soccer League or various flavors of the original XFLs, plural, or the Federal League perhaps, or maybe World Team Tennis, or maybe it was the North American Soccer League, and on and on and on. But hey, it's not just sports. It's also great cultural touchstones and memories from the past. How about the officially licensed Evel Knievel connection? How about collection? Yeah, that's what he's trying to say. Various colleges. How about dead malls of the past? Ice cream parlors, maybe even radio stations that you might remember. Hey, even there's a latest edition of the now old, Aloha Stadium commemorative shirt. All that kind of stuff and more. You will find at least a handful of shirts that you will just transport you back into your past, and you will amaze and impress your friends at the same time. It's oldschoolshirts.com, and we got a promo code for you, of course. Let's save you some dough while you go there, and it's promo code is Good Seats. Good Seats. That's the promo code at oldschoolshirts.com. Promo code Good Seats for 10% off all of your purchases. Hey, P.F. Wilson and your friends at oldschoolshirts.com, thank you for your sponsorship of the show. And now, back to our conversation. So tell me the transition, though, into the Fox thing, right? So were you at HTS at the time? Had you moved to MSG by that time? And how... I gotta think your surname didn't hurt in terms of getting on people's radars, but obviously you were building a portfolio as well, and you had obviously had success calling games and stuff. Obviously not in football per se, but how does that magical opportunity happen? Because I'm sure there were a ton of people with a ton of tapes out there chasing that one down. How did you and that crew that you just mentioned earlier kind of get the shots and then get the gigs?
No, you're right. Between myself, Joe Buck, Tom Brenneman, and Kevin Harlan, we all had fathers in the business, three of whom were sportscasters. Kevin Harlan's dad, Bob, was the president of the Green Bay Packers. So it certainly helped get the foot in the door as far as an interview. But another aspect of the story is George Krieger, who was one of the executives at Fox at the time when they first put together a sports department. His son was a high school lacrosse player. And back then, there was no internet. Not a lot of games on cable or satellite television, which had just come into play. And he somehow knew Jody Shapiro at Home Team Sports and had asked Jody for some tapes of college lacrosse games. And it turns out I called one of the games that Jody passed along to George. So he heard my commentary on a lacrosse game. And we all were flown out to LA for auditions. There were many other play-by-play and color analysts as well. My audition was with Hall of Famer James Lofton. We did our rehearsal game that day together back in March of '94. And again, I'm sure we all did have help getting our foot in the door because of the last names. But once we were hired, we had to prove ourselves. And again, very proud that it's season number 30 for me at Fox. Joe, Kevin, Tom, great careers since that first year. Kevin was the only one of the group who had much experience calling football with the Kansas City Chiefs on the radio side. So that was how it all started back in '94.
When you moved over there, how much did the Fox Sports brain trust at that time, I'm assuming that's David Hill and friends, how much did they have, if you will, in terms of sports other than the NFL that they had just picked off from the NFC package from CBS, and how much, frankly, was it more just kind of a promissory that other sports literally were going to come and fill into the fold? I mean, I think people don't even realize that for a bit of a time there, that Fox Sports literally was just this NFL package.
Well, it's funny you say that, because at the first Fox NFL seminar in the summer of '94, we get together every summer now for 30 years, all the announcers, the production groups, the executives. John Madden, in front of a room filled with about 200 people, raised his hand and said, "Why are we called Fox Sports? We only have one sport. This should be Fox Sport." And football was the only sport initially. And David Hill and Ed Gore and George Krieger, they hired a lot of the producers and directors from CBS who had experience doing football, many of the color analysts as well. But slowly but surely, in 95, Fox signed up with the NHL. In 96, Major League Baseball. And then a couple of years later, horse racing. And then eventually college basketball, college football, soccer. So it all started with football. And for about a year, it should have been called Fox Sport, not Fox Sports. But right now, between Fox Sports, FS1, so many different sports on the various outlets, but it all did start with the NFL.
Were you just giddy when Fox got the NHL in 95 and the glowing puck at that?
Oh, I was, because I had been doing the Capitals and then I moved over to the Rangers in 95. And it was really the first opportunity to do hockey on network TV. I worked 2 games for ESPN2, the Deuce, the year before in 94. But when Fox got hockey, I was part of the roster right from the start. Doc Emmerich and John Davidson were the number 1 crew, and then Sam Rosen and Joe Micheletti. And, I was part of the depth at the time with some other great announcers. So Fox had the NHL for 5 years, great memories, called, a number of games every season, regular season and playoffs. The glowing puck, David Hill was ahead of his time. There was some resistance to it. My feeling was, if it helps the viewers follow the puck, why not? And now, 30 years later, you watch, golf, baseball, so many other sporting events, you see technology similar to what the glowing puck was back in the late 90s.
Yeah, I almost wonder if something along those lines comes back. And I think, too, when you look at streaming and various forms of interactivity and how consumers, especially young males, like to enjoy the games with perhaps the game in the background and the screens and the trash talking and the whatever in the foreground, I cannot imagine that, and clearly with chips and all that kind of stuff, that stuff like this couldn't make a comeback of some sort, especially perhaps for that casual fan, which still I think kind of bedevils a little bit the NHL experience for most. I think it's probably the ultimate of the big 4, big 5. It's sort of that sort of regional passion, and it still has that sort of, I don't know, that sort of a difficulty, I guess, transcending sometimes to that sort of national consciousness level.
And I think the technology has certainly helped, whether it was the glowing puck back in the late 90s and then the advent of HD TV in the early 2000s, and now with some of the, cameras and other technology that has been introduced, it certainly enhanced the viewing for the fans sitting at home.
All right. Well, I did literally and figuratively right into that one, right? So the 3D thing. So coming into this conversation, I thought for sure I had discovered a unique piece of information that nobody else had, that you were the only person, I think, to have helmed 2 major network 3D broadcasts in your career. 2009, the Bowl Championship Series for Fox, as well as the All-Star game for the Major League Baseball in 2010. But until I read your book, of course, alas, you are a Triple Crown champion, so to speak, in the realm of 3D. Number 1, what was that third game, if you remember, hopefully? And number 2, what made you the go-to guy for this 3D thing that sort of came and went?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I was just in the right place at the right time within the various networks that I worked for, but did work 3 3D telecasts. Now, we called the game pretty much as we would normally. Although we did make reference, we wore 3D glasses during the opening segment. But for the most part, it didn't change much on my end. You mentioned the BCS championship game. It was Florida, Tim Tebow against Sam Bradford, Oklahoma, down in Miami. So called that game for the 3D telecast. The baseball all-star game in 2010 in Anaheim. Mark Grace was my broadcast partner. Will Ferrell actually recorded the starting lineups for that 3D telecast, and I have a picture with him. We're both wearing the 3D glasses, so that's a memory that's certainly entrenched in my brain. And then at Madison Square Garden, once called a 3D game between the Rangers and Islanders, which was shown in the theater next door to a couple of hundred people in the business on the technology side. So I had 3 of the 4 covered. Never did basketball in 3D, but football, baseball, and hockey are on my 3D checklist.
So it was a live closed circuit next door to the then Felt Forum, was it?
Right, the old Felt Forum, which is now the Hulu Theater. The game was broadcast normally, as it normally would be on MSG Network, but Dave Maloney and I, we do Rangers radio together, but that night we did the 3D broadcast, which was closed circuit right next door at the theater.
Interesting. And I guess the idea was to what? Others were doing it, and why not sort of experiment with it and see perhaps if it's something that can be brought to local regional games?
Right, exactly. It was on an experimental basis at that point.
That's again, that's to me, that's pretty interesting. Now, that said, though, with that kind of background, it almost seems like you could be easily teed up for what I think is becoming kind of a phenomenon, and maybe we'll segue into sort of the today of sports, is these alternate telecasts, right? These alternate broadcasts. Obviously, a lot of it was sort of jump started, I guess, by the pandemic and having people chat in a chat box or somehow have the game as a sideline or as a component. And now, to the point where we're seeing Toy Story executions of the NFL and the Nickelodeon game, the slime games, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really curious. I mean, you're a classic bread and butter sports broadcaster, and from probably the richest, most solid and revered sports broadcasting family on the planet. How do you feel about these newer ways of presenting or maybe in many cases interfering with the broadcasts of the game with all this stuff and extra commentary and stuff? Good, bad, and different?
I'm a big fan of the Manning cast. I started watching it a couple of years ago, right from the start. Now, if you're a rabid fan of one of the teams playing, you're probably not going to watch it because they're not focusing on each and every play. So the rabid fans are going to watch the mainstream telecast. But I love hearing what the Mannings have to say. They're both such students of the game. They have photographic memories. They've had great guests on there. So, if I'm not watching the game from from the purpose of studying for my next broadcast, for example, where I have to keep a close eye on the names and numbers and the storylines, then I'll watch the regular broadcast. But I really enjoy the Manning cast. I haven't watched all of these alternate broadcasts. I know a lot have been done on college football and college basketball, but I think there's certainly a place for them. There are so many channels out there and avenues for these games to be broadcasted. So why not? If it helps bring in extra viewers to a given channel or network, then I'm all for it.
Even if you're the main game caller of the match, and people may not hear your expert commentary and calls of the game, huh?
Well, as long as they're still hiring us to do the game, then I guess it's okay. I wouldn't want our broadcast to go away for only, I wouldn't want that alternate broadcast to become the main broadcast if it's a sport or a network that I'm involved with. But as an alternate broadcast, it's more work for everybody, for the production people, et cetera. So, why not? I'm all for it in that circumstance for sure.
You mentioned in the book that, and surprisingly, that I think most people in the sports realm would look at hoops and hockey as being perhaps the more difficult sports to kind of cover because there is so much action, and in some cases, especially in hockey, your head's almost on the swivel sometimes. But surprisingly, you mentioned baseball is actually a bit harder. Do you want to tell our audience as to why that is in terms of comparison to the others, given that you are such a ubiquitous presence in so many sports?
Well, for me personally, when people ask the question, they always expect me to say that hockey is the hardest. To me, it's the easiest, maybe because I've done it for so long, and especially on radio for 60 minutes, the puck's in action. So you're calling the game. Basketball is similar, 48 minutes, although there are more stoppages, whistles for fouls, and the ball out of bounds, et cetera. Football is the most rhythmic. It's one play and then 20 or 25 seconds. Another play, 20 or 25 seconds. Baseball to me is the most challenging because I only do between 10 and 15 games every season. So, the other aspect of it is the ball's only in play for about 8 or 9 minutes a game. There's so much time to fill. Hopefully you have a great color analyst with you. Now, it has gotten a little bit easier, I feel like, this past year with the advent of the pitch clock. It does feel a little more like the fast-paced sports where you don't have a lot of time between batters and between pitches. So that certainly changed a little bit. But for me, that's the reason why it's more challenging than the other sports for a play-by-play.
I'm sorry. How much of an adjustment was the pitch clock for you? How long did it take you to kind of pick up the pace and keep up with it? Because it seemed like for a couple of weeks there in spring training, a lot of broadcasters had a tough time with it.
Right, because I don't do a team on a regular basis. I did one baseball game in April, and then I started up again after the hockey playoffs ended in June. So I was able to watch other games, listen to other broadcasters, but I'm sure it was quite an adjustment for those who are around the sport on a day-to-day basis.
Explain maybe too your the differences between local versus national broadcasts, right? Because you do a hefty amount of both. Is there anything that you have to do differently? Anything you have to psychically prepare yourself to kind of not do or remember to follow through on or nuance differently a national audience versus that of a local team?
That's a great question. Definitely. The football and baseball that I do, those are all national games. Basketball, I only do local. So it comes into play in hockey. I work the Wednesday TNT national games and then radio for the Rangers. So when I'm working a Rangers game on the network, whether it was NBC in the past or TNT these days, I do have to remind myself to get just as excited when the opposing team scores. During national games, we're calling it right down the middle, 50-50. I know the local fans are used to hearing their local broadcasters perhaps talk about their teams 75, 80% of the time, which I get because I do local broadcasts as well, but definitely have to remind myself when it's a national broadcast to call the game 50-50 as far as giving both teams an equal amount of time during my call, during some of the stories I might be telling, and to make sure that I get just as excited when the opposing team scores.
And how about the proverbial radio versus TV thing? And is there such a thing as a simulcast? I know people like Chick Hearn and back in the day, right? Used to sort of it was kind of a staple of the local broadcasting, especially when times were tight, so to speak, at the club level. But is it literally possible to do a simulcast? And I don't know how many you've done of late or even in your past, but I got to think that's the ultimately most difficult thing to do because you're trying to satisfy two audiences at once.
Right, and I don't think I've ever done one, to be honest. But
interesting.
I don't think personally that you can satisfy both audiences to the extent that you would want to with separate broadcasts. A number of teams have gone to simulcast in the various sports. You're not talking enough for radio, and you're probably talking too much for television. Radio versus TV, there is a big difference. On radio, you have to be a lot more descriptive. You have to give the time and the score a lot more often because the viewers can't see it on the screen. On TV, you don't have to talk as much when you're doing play-by-play. You could leave more time for your color analysts to come in and comment while the play's going on. So definitely major differences between the radio and the TV call.
Okay, I'm not Richard Deitch, and this is not the sports broadcast podcast, but I am fascinated with some of the questions, the types of questions that he asks around preparation and a process. And I think it would be helpful for our audience to know a little bit. I mean, you present yourself in the book as you with somewhat of some deprecation, call yourself an organized hoarder, and I think only in the best way, hopefully, in terms of preparation and stuff. But it's different, right? I mean, your NFL prep, right, which is, if you will, a big broadcast at the end or the beginning of a week, right, is kind of a different cadence and a different sort of setup than a midweek NHL game for the network and a more regular paced, more I guess more often scheduled local broadcast schedule for, say, Ranger games.
Yeah, the preparation, that's something I do talk about in the book. And for a typical football game, I start on Monday morning, and it's probably 20, 30 hours between all of the work that I do on my own, Monday through Thursday, watching prior games, a lot of reading, preparing charts, going through statistics and other materials provided by the league and by the teams and by the networks. And then Friday, we usually go to the home team practice, sit down with about 4 or 5 players and coaches, we'll do the same thing with the visiting team when they arrive on Saturday, or occasionally the last few years over a Zoom call. For a football game, like I said, I start Monday morning. For basketball, hockey, baseball, I'm usually reading the clips from each city starting about a week before the game. Those teams play a lot more, obviously, than the football teams do. So you're watching games during the week leading up to your game. I have a checklist that I follow for each sport, and it involves, like I just said, watching previous games, a lot of reading, preparing your charts, your spotting boards. I do everything by hand, by myself, because I feel like you remember the information a lot more that way. So there's a lot of work, again, a lot of prep work, a lot of travel that go into it, but I look at it as fun work. I never feel like I'm doing something that I hate. I'm not going to an office. I'm not doing manual labor, for 8-10 hours a day. I'm watching sporting events. I'm reading about sports, and it's what I've always loved to do. And I feel like the preparation is the most important part of it.
And what is it about the chart? There's probably nothing more singularly important and personal, I guess, to the sports broadcaster than the preparatory chart that she or he brings to the game. There's all kinds of different sort of methodologies and idiosyncrasies and personalized approaches and that kind of stuff. And I think it's probably fair to say there's probably no one that's the same when you compare them broadcaster to broadcaster. What is it about that versus, say, some other form of either note-taking or PR releases or news and stuff? I mean, what is it about the chart that is so essential, I guess, to so many broadcasters?
Well, everybody does have their own method. Some look alike, some look similar to one another. Others are totally different.
Color coding and
right. I'll use the colors of the teams, for example, on my football charts, just because when your eyes look down, you see the green writing, it's the Green Bay Packers. And when you see the blue, it's the Los Angeles Rams, for example. The charts have the basic biographical information about the players, their uniform number, name, height, weight, college, years pro, statistical information, and then just some other various notes and tidbits. And again, my football charts look the same as they did 30 years ago. The hockey and basketball and baseball look pretty similar, haven't changed too much. But I don't like to have a lot of information in front of me when you're in the booth, because you want to keep your eyes focused on the game, no matter what the sport is. But that you can glance down at it. I have all the information on this one chart from the thousands of pages that I've read and gone through during the week. And I'll save them, because I'll go back the next time I have a specific team, and I'll transfer over a lot of that information. Some of it I may have used on a prior broadcast, and some of it I never got the opportunity. I feel like I use about 10% of the information that I prepare, because you want to let the game really tell the story and dictate which avenues you go.
Anytime you ever lost it, or you dropped it, or forgot your chart, or some other piece of information wasn't with you that you had to kind of thumper your way through on your own?
Never lost it, never forgot it. There was one Rangers game in Edmonton where I realized, for whatever reason, I didn't bring an extra one. I have them printed up they look different, obviously, for each sport, but my hockey chart has boxes for the line combinations in the middle, and there's a score sheet on the back, and then on the front is where I mark down certain information, the team's records, home and away, upcoming schedule, last couple of games, the starting goalies, etc. One time I didn't bring one with me, so I basically had to recreate my chart on a manila folder, and it all worked out. But that's the only time I can remember that I didn't bring a blank one with me to fill out prior to the game.
Well, and the adrenaline alone must have gotten you through all that, right? Because you're trying to remember every single piece of thing, and then get on the air. So tell me, we'll wrap up with a couple of quickies here. Obviously, you have done and continue to do uniquely multiple sports simultaneously, overlapping seasons and that kind of stuff. How you keep your head and your travel and your statistical information straight, I'll never know. Are there any sports that you still would like to give a try? And are there just some that you just know that you're likely just not cut out for? Are you game for anything?
I'm pretty much game for anything. as far as the first part of the question, you have to really just be organized and get ahead of things. And like I said, I start preparing about a week in advance for each game. I do take photos now of my hotel room in case I forget, sometimes 3 or 4 hotels in a week. And was I in room 362 last time or was that today? So I'll take a photo of it on the phone. As far as the different sports, having been involved for so long in the 4 major sports in the U.S., football, hockey, basketball, and baseball, I've also done, way back in the day, some lacrosse and soccer and Olympic volleyball and track and field. And I've done a lot of boxing as well. The one sport that I felt like I had no clue what I was watching was college wrestling. Back in the mid 90s, working for Home Team Sports, they assigned me to the ACC Wrestling Championships. And I studied and I bought Wrestling for Dummies. And I spoke to Jeff Blatnick, an Olympic wrestler, and he was a big help in the preparation, but I really felt like I had no clue once it started. But as far as other sports that I haven't done, maybe tennis would be intriguing someday. I enjoy tennis. I play tennis. So that's one that I've never really had any broadcasting experience with. But aside from that, I've always enjoyed watching curling at the Olympics. I don't think I certainly am not an expert as far as the rules and the strategy, but when I did Olympic volleyball, when I received that assignment a couple of years ago, bought Volleyball for Dummies and sat down with our local high school volleyball coach. And I said to her, please teach me the strategy, the history, the rules, etc. And she was a huge help. So try to use whatever resources I can when assigned to some of the sports that I'm not necessarily as familiar with.
Well, they might come in handy, and that this sort of leads me to sort of the the end sort of questions here on sort of the current state of sports and the future of it, but not just the broadcast part of it, but just money and expansions and frankly new sports. I mean, there is a wealth of literally and figuratively money that's being invested. It seems there seems to be a new league or 2 or 3 in the realm of volleyball. I think there are going to be 3 or maybe 4 even that I've heard rumored. I can see a merger or 2 already on the horizon. Professional volleyball leagues. And in the 70s, one of the decades we love to obsess about on this show, I mean, there's probably the last real burgeoning decade of challenger leagues and stuff in traditional sports and launching of pro leagues in sports that had never had one before, like the International Volleyball Association. I digress. I guess the question in there is, from your vantage point, I mean, you may be sort of insulated a little bit in that you're broadcasting the game and the mechanics of television, that kind of stuff. But do you worry about where professional sports kind of is right now? I mean, you're talking about like stadiums now that are $1 billion plus, right? And local governments being, threatened, if you will, to move and that kind of stuff. You've got franchise valuations in the multi-billions of dollars. You've got international money coming in. And I don't know. It feels like it's the best of times, but potentially there's some worrisome things attached to that too, because the NFL has never been bigger than it currently is. Right. But it's just the average fan, for example, you wonder just how affordable just to take a family of 4 out to a baseball game it's just, I can't imagine this major increase in prices and this unfettered investment is necessarily going to continue to go up forever. I don't know. Maybe I'm just waxing nostalgic here, but do you see any, shall we say, cracks in the pro sports game these days, or am I kind of just imagining that?
No, from a TV and broadcast standpoint, I don't think so. Sometimes I do wonder how a family of 4 can't afford to go to sporting events on a regular basis. But from a television standpoint, to me, live sports are the best reality TV. You look at the NFL last season, 82 of the top 100 television shows on U.S. networks were NFL games. So I think the NFL is doing just fine. And as far as from a broadcast aspect, we see the rights deals in the various leagues. I know the NBA is in the middle of their negotiations. Hockey's tied up for 5 more years. Football, obviously, long term. So I think from that aspect, it's very healthy moving forward. We've seen streaming with Amazon coming in with the NFL and rumors about other streaming services. So again, in my mind, sports is the best reality TV, and I'm just very fortunate to be able to call games in the various sports and for multiple networks, and hope that never changes.
Yeah, and I guess that's my last question. And obviously, Fox has, as a business, right, over the last number of years, they sold the studios to Disney, and they doubled down on live sports and news, and it's looking pretty smart, right? Given that what you just said, right, live sports in particular is probably the most must-see TV out there in a slew of things that are available at a button's push, on command and on demand and all that kind of stuff. What do you think thus far of taking yourself out of the Fox realm for a minute and the Turner realm for a second? What do you notice any, as either as a fan or as a professional or both, the difference between broadcasting and streaming environments versus over the air and broadcast? Or is there really no difference? Because it's clearly moving more towards streaming first in a lot of different respects. I wonder if that has an effect on perhaps how you ultimately may wind up calling these games over time, or maybe doing supplemental content and that kind of stuff.
Right. Not really. I haven't noticed a difference yet from a broadcast standpoint, from our vantage point. It's just a matter of where the games are being broadcast. Are they on one of the networks, cable TV, or on a streaming service? In many cases, they're on both the network and a streaming service, but fans are able to get their games in so many different fashions these days. As you know, back when we were growing up, we had 7 channels in the New York area: 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13. And then with the advent of cable TV and then satellite, direct TV, and these days the younger generation, they don't even know what that's like, having to use a remote control or going up and changing the channel on the actual TV set in your bedroom or in your living room. Now, whatever your device is, an iPhone, a computer, an iPad, you can access pretty much any game and any sport, live or highlights, with a quick click. So, I'm a big fan of technology and the advances that we've seen over the last 20 or 30 years. And it will continue for many, many years to come, I'm sure.
All right, time to promote. The book has been out for a couple of months now, right? Name and where people can get it, and how much have you? I guess you've been doing everything you can to promote the heck out of it, if you're doing a podcast as silly as this one.
Well, I've enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on, Tim. It officially comes out to the public next week, October 10th.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I'm sorry. I thought it was already out. So how about that? I'm glad. Okay, cool.
No, it's out next week. I've had personal copies for the last month or so, had a couple of private events. So it is out there in small doses to this point. Friends and family and some others have copies of it, and folks who attended the 2 or 3 events that I've already been a part of. But it's a Mike for All Seasons, Triumph books. You could find it online, pre-order, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Target, etc. Triumph Books website. It was a lot of fun. Forwards by Walt Clyde Frazier and Wayne Gretzky. So hopefully some of the listeners will pick it up. And I know you've seen a copy of it, so thanks for the help in promoting it. But it officially will be released to the public October 10th.
All right, last but not least, do you actually remember the theme song of the Baltimore Skipjacks? And can you hum a few bars before we go?
Not a good hummer, but or singer, but there's a story in the book about a game in which the Skipjacks scored 9 goals in the first period. So the Skipjacks fight song sounded like it was on a loop, and it started with "Win you Baltimore Skipjacks, win you Skipjacks of Baltimore," and then it went on. And I do have the lyrics in the book, but that was a memorable game. 9-goal first period against Hershey, and 9 different times hearing the Baltimore Skipjacks fight song.
Well, and that was your first game, right?
It was the first month. It wasn't the first game. My first game was in Hershey, but that was a different game against the Bears. This was a home game later in the month of October, 1990.
Well, I've been searching for that for a production for this. The Clippers, I know, the team that was there before the Skipjacks.
Right, they had a similar fight song, but they just substituted the name Skipjacks instead of Clippers.
There you go. Mystery solved. I should have known that. Kenny, thank you for making time for us. I know you've got a ridiculously busy schedule and stuff, and I wish you nothing but the success going forward. And healthy vocal cords and plenty of good sports moments yet to go. I mean, for all the stuff that you have done in your past, you are still a relatively young guy in this business, and I think you could go on forever if you really want to put your mind to it. I don't know how much energy you still have to pursue all of those years ahead, but it's great to hear and see your enthusiasm for all of it. And I think for all fans out there, I think you are probably the consummate professional. The fact that you are so not only ubiquitous, but so versatile in all these different sports and stuff, it really is a testament to your preparation and skill and all that kind of stuff. And, God bless, many, many more years to come, I hope.
Thanks, Tim. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Our thanks to Kenny. And not only can you hear him just about everywhere you watch a sporting event, especially on Fox or in the New York City area and local sports, but also the book, must get, must read, enjoyable read, and you will find it immensely entertaining. It is called, again, A Mic for All Seasons, My 3 Decades Announcing the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLB, and Olympics by the one, the only Kenny Albert. Forwards by Wayne Gretzky and Walt Clyde Frazier, and a whole bunch of other folks have weighed in with their praise for this book. You will enjoy it, and you can get it now. Well, if it's on the 9th of October when we drop this episode, it is available tomorrow on the 10th. So pre-order it. If it's the 10th or beyond when you're listening to this show, you can get it right now. Either way, by all means, figure out a way to get it. Any good bookseller will have it. But of course, you can go to our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com, search up this episode number 320 with our new pal, Kenny Albert, and you will find a convenient link or 2 or 3 to Amazon, and you can get the hardcover or the Kindle version, and we will get a couple of referral shekels of love, and we appreciate that very much. And while you're on the website at goodseatsstillavailable.com, just search up all of our episodes. We've got them all there for you to play around with, listen, download, stream them, whatever you want to do, send them to friends. Of course, the best way to ingest the goodness that we try to give for you, to you each week is to subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcast player, catcher, app, whatever it might be. A couple of 5-star reviews once in a while when you get the chance. We appreciate that too. And while you're tooling around online and on a mobile, why don't you follow us as well? We're on Twitter. We're at Good Seats Still. On Instagram, you'll find us at Good Seats Still Available. And on Facebook, you'll find us at Good Seats Still Available as well. On the Twitter/X, you'll also find Kenny Albert conveniently at Kenny Albert. All one word. Pretty easy to do, right? If you'd like to send us some email, you can do that too. We're at hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. We appreciate your cards and letters virtually, of course. And what else? The great Jerry Payne has once again come through, even though his Atlanta Braves have yet to prove anything in the playoffs of any substance. We'll see how the series goes, but good luck to him and the Braves. Why not? They're a force to be reckoned with, and that series with the Phillies is only going to get more intense in the days ahead. And of course, thank you to you know who you are, you listeners out there, you crazy kids. Thanks for supporting us and keeping us going each and every week. And hopefully you'll enjoy what we've got in the weeks ahead. Lots of good stuff, lots of great guests and wonderful topics. Until next week, we'll see you. And please, as always, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.
Win you Baltimore Clippers. Win you Clippers from Baltimore. Fight you Baltimore Clippers. Face off, fight for a Baltimore score. Defensemen, forwards, and goalie will win without a doubt. For Baltimore and Maryland, every Clipper fan will shout, fight, fight, fight. Win you Baltimore Clippers. Win you Clippers from Baltimore. Fight you Baltimore Clippers. And score, score, score. Baltimore Clippers. Win you Clippers from Baltimore. Fight you Baltimore Clippers.